Listen to a quote from Karl Marx. Now, Karl Marx is where all the neo-Marxists and so forth get it from. You know, this is where all those get it from, is Karl Marx. Listen to what Karl Marx said. Now, this is amazing, isn't it? You want me to tell you why? Because Karl Marx, when he grew up, was a pious Christian. As a young man, and somewhere, I think it was around his 18th birthday, he turned against God. Something happened, and he turned against God. But you listen to this. He believed in God, but then he set himself totally against Him. You think communism is political. I want you to listen to something. This was his quote. "I wish to avenge myself against the one who rules from above." This was Karl Marx's quote. "I wish to avenge myself against the one who rules from above." This is a quote of a man possessed, not an atheist. People say, well, was he a Christian? Man, I don't know. You know, you live in the world of profession. But they say he was up until he was a teenager at some age. And then suddenly, he said he wanted to avenge himself against the one who rules from above. Now, was Karl Marx a Satanist? We're about to shift gears. You ready? There was a book written by Richard Wurmbrand, a faithful Romanian Christian who spent 8 years in a communist prison for sharing the gospel and refusing to deny his Lord. His best known book is Tortured for Christ. His testimony of God's triumph in the middle of communist persecution. Now, this was some things from his book that he wrote when he got out. And remember now, he wouldn't deny Jesus, is why he spent all that time in that communist prison. It says one only has to read Marx's analysis of Hegel to see that Marx is clearly demon-possessed. But Wurmbrand suspects there might be more to it. Wurmbrand is not, if I say his name right, is not saying Marx made a pact with the devil. He's saying he used Luciferian categories, languages, etc., and later Marxists were openly satanic. Okay, listen to this. It says, we will consider Marx drama. And I don't know how to say this exactly the way it's written, but it's Olenim, which is an inversion of the name Emmanuel. And specifically, it's a specifically satanic move. Marx wrote that. Marx writes this, listen. The hellish, now this is what he wrote. The hellish vapors rise and fill the brain, till I go mad and my heart is utterly changed. See this sword, he said. The prince of darkness sold it to me. For me he beats the time and gives the signs. Ever more boldly I play the dance of death. That's Karl Marx, founder of communism, said that. Wurmbrand comments, these lines take on a special significance when we learn that in the rites of higher initiation in the Satanist cult, an enchanted sword which ensures success is sold to the candidate. He pays for it by signing a covenant with blood taken from his wrist, agreeing that his soul will belong to Satan after death. Karl Marx. Marx writes a letter to his father. A curtain had fallen. My holy of holies was rent asunder, and new gods had to be installed. He told his father that in a letter. That was on the 10th of November, 1837. Instead of telling his kids fairy tales at bedtimes, he told them stories of men who sold their souls to the devil. Wurmbrand quotes Robert Paine. There can be very little doubt that those interminable stories were autobiographical. He said he had the devil's view of the world and the devil's malignity. Sometimes he seemed to know that he was accomplishing works of evil. Speaking of the anarchist Bakunin, Wurmbrand has a very interesting paragraph. Bakunin reveals that Proudhon, another major socialist thinker, and at that time a friend of Karl Marx, also worshiped Satan. Hess had introduced Marx to Proudhon, who wore the same hairstyle typical of the 19th century Satanist sect of Joanna Southcott. Marx's favorite daughter, Eleanor, married an avowed Satanist, Edward Ebeling. Now, Mark's behavior on his deathbed was rather strange. His housemaid, and I'll just say this, and prostitute, they said, but they didn't say that. Helen DeMuth said he prayed before candles the week before his death. Marx never practiced Judaism, and he openly rejected Christianity. So what was happening? More interesting is that he had a statue of Zeus. Zeus, as those who aren't enamored of a bowdlerized Greek classicism known as Satan. Plain and simple. Wurmbrand said Britain's center of Satanism is Highgate Cemetery in London, where Karl Marx is buried. Mysterious rites of black magic are celebrated at this tomb. It was the place of inspiration for the Highgate vampire who attacked several girls in 1970. 35 of them, or 35, it said. Many on the left like to characterize Marx as an irreligious socialist. However, Marx cared little about humanity and righting the wrongs of society. He was driven to rid the world of God, and it was only later that he seized on socialism as a method for enticing people into his anti-religion efforts. His true desire was destruction of God's creation. Listen to this quote. Then I will be able to walk triumphantly like God through the ruins of their kingdom. Every word of mine is fire in action. My breast is equal to that of the Creator. This quote was taken from Richard Wurmbrand's Marx and Satan. Isn't that something? So Karl Marx wasn't just a communist or the founder of the Communist Party. Karl Marx was a Satanist. And socialism and communism only came as a way and a method for him to destroy God in the world.